and hear from the budget team.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Hi, my name is Marie Reyes. Good afternoon, board members. Thank you for having me today. I'm going to go over your, last year's budget, the expenditure that was done. I believe Shara has sent you the two PDFs for optometry and for RDO. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. This is only as of May 31st because fiscal year 1920 has not closed yet. We anticipate that to happen sometime in September or October. But so far, optometry, the projections I've done for this particular one is very conservative. I've tried and put everything possible that I can think of that would be expended to make sure that you don't go over your appropriation. Shara and I had gone back and forth in regards to this. She has been very fiscally responsible. We're always in good communication in regards to this if there's any overspending, and then we look at particular items. For optometry, I anticipate the program to basically be reverting $207. Boy, was that close. And that's simply because of I projected AG, Attorney General, and OAH to be spent at what I'm projecting it to spend. And I think I'm over projecting, but I'd rather be over projecting than under projecting to make sure you guys end up in the positive for the end of the fiscal year. Any questions on optometry?
Do any of the board members have questions about the optometry budget?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, okay. Travel, in-state travel. It looks like the projection is that we'll spend 21,000. Did we already spent the 18,000 before the pandemic started? Is that correct?
That is correct. All travels have basically stopped ever since the pandemic.
Right.
But please note, even on previous years, it's actually been going down, because the reason why I sent you, let me see, 16, 17, 17, 18, is so you can see that it's been going down. As I said, she's been very conservative with most of her spending for this fiscal year. You can see at one point back in 2016, it was at 39,000. This year, I'm anticipating it to be 21, but it's likely that it's at 18,826 because there was no travel done for the past few months.
I'm just looking at some of the ones that are way over anticipated expenses. Facility operations is going at 176%. Is that because of the remodel of the office?
The facility operation, Shara and I have had discussion about this, is that it's always been, the way the breakdown has been done is that it's always been on the lower end. That has nothing to do with the repairs to the office. Basically, it's gone down from last year from 132 to 103. It's the monthly rental for the office space. Because we do bottom line budgeting. We don't do an adjustments for basically that. We don't do adjustments for each line item. Like, for example, let me see where you're over on the CNP interdepartment, that's an overage of 88,000. We don't adjust that amount to cover for some of the rent. We don't do that adjustment. It's a bottom line, so we just look at what's going to be at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, so it's just
Marie, if I could,
okay.
if I could chime in really quickly. So actually, that does not reflect the remodel. And in fact, the remodel, because we downsized our space, it actually reduced our rent each month. And we are still, of course, waiting for numbers, but we were included in the augmentation, rent augmentation for many state agencies, so that our allotment on that line will come up to, within the next year's budget, will come up to our actual market rate rent. So actually, what you see there, it effectuates a half year of rent reduction, and then we're hoping that as final numbers come out, we will have an allotment that's up to scale with what our actual lower rent is.
And even with the remodel, it was at minimal, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Shara, you've reused some of the furnitures, the old furnitures and stuff like that. It's not like you purchased everything new. I had the opportunity to visit it, and that's one of the things I make mention in the comment is, oh, you recycled this. I saw this in the last one. So the remodel really didn't have a big impact on the budget.
Yes, and we were lucky enough to receive some furniture donations from several other boards, including Bureau of Post-Private Secondary Education and Bureau of Automotive Resources. So we were happy that they were able to give us some of the furniture that they no longer needed in order to accommodate most of our storage needs within our physical files for enforcement.
But anybody else about the optometry budget? I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and move on to the RDO budget, and then we'll take public comment after that.
Okay. The RDO budget, basically, I did the same thing with this particular one. I was very conservative since it's only as of May 31st. I wanted to make sure that the program or your board ends in a positive. So everything is accounted for in here, and you guys are going to have a reversion of 2.2% or 12,585. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Shara? Shara?
Yes, it's best for me to keep my mic off while you're saying your question so that my interference, the air conditioner here is really loud, but I am listening and will answer as soon as you're done.
Okay, my question is, once 486 is enacted and we can merge these budgets, do you see any of these expenses dropping or increasing? Do you, instead of the net result between us having a 0% for optometry and optician having a 2.2% surplus, do you see that surplus or deficit going up or down in a merged fund?
So all of the planning that we've done, it's difficult to say. There shouldn't be any reason that expenditures go up. What we're hoping, though, more than anything is rather than lowering costs or hiring or raising costs, is that this will give us more flexibility. So the arrangement of the licensing unit that I spoke about yesterday, that's only possible with the merged funds because we have 3 MST management service technicians within licensing, but they're spread across optometry and opticianry. So once our funds merge, we'll have an opportunity to use those 3 licensing positions on both of the programs at peak times when needed. So it's really more about a flexibility of our resources than it is decreasing or increasing resources. Also to help Alex out with his enforcement caseload that he handles all on opticianry. So really more about flexibility and using staff wisely.
Any other questions from board members?
Somebody probably knows the answer to this already, and it's gone beyond me. I didn't catch it at any point. With regard to expenditures to date, does that mean actually expenditures that have been paid out, or those that have accrued and include things that have yet to be paid out but have been accrued?
Well, this one, basically, we've anticipated everything that's going to be paid out. On that column, where it says current year expenditure, those are the ones that has already been paid out. The projection to year end is the one that I'm anticipating to pay more out. Like for example, for optometry, go back there, and you would see in the salary, we've paid 493, basically $944,920. I'm anticipating that to be up to 1.036 simply because there's the month of June for salaries. So everything on the projected is what I'm anticipating on coming in. And this projection, as I said, is very conservative. I know for a fact that for the personnel in itself, that's $10,000 over projected. So, but I wanted to make sure that I captured everything. So your reversion is definitely going to be more than 207.
Okay, thank you.
Did that clarify it, or?
I'm not sure I'm phrasing my question correctly. I guess
Okay.
I'm saying actual expenditures, does that include any kind of funds that have accrued, the expense has accrued but not been paid yet? Or the actual expenditures, what actually has been paid?
They're the one that has been paid.
Okay.
The one in the one in the projection is the one that we're anticipating to pay for the next month.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, anybody else from the board? If not, moderator, can we go ahead and open up for public comment?
Sure, this is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. So if you would like to make a public comment, please type, I would like to make a comment, and send it to all panelists. If you're not seeing the Q&A panel, please click on the question mark within a square at the bottom middle of your screen, and we are displaying instructions as well. This is the moderator, and Mr. Vice, I'm seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so any last questions, comments for section 19 from the board members before we close this and go on to the next item? Hearing none. Mark, are you ready to get back in?
Glenn, why don't you share the next item too?
Okay, Cheryl, which one did you want to go to next? We're a little out of order now.
Thank you. Yes. Looking at our attendees list, we have some speakers who still need to join us. So if we can pop back to item number 9, update and discussion on possible action on Assembly Bill 896, that should give us enough time to get the rest of our presenters here with us.
Perfect. Are you or Mark going to go ahead and give us a summary?
Mark will get the summary.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kawaguchi. Assembly Bill 896 is currently working its way through the Senate process, the final process before it hopefully gets passed on to the governor's desk. It was passed out of the Senate Business and Professions Committee with some amendments. All the amendments, we have worked very closely with stakeholders and with the author's office and the Senate B&P committee. It looks like we've satisfied all their concerns as well as addressing all of the work group's concerns. The bill will be heard, I believe, on Tuesday in Senate Appropriations. And we did actually talk with their staff a couple of weeks ago. I had a very good conversation with them. And from there, it will hopefully get through the appropriations, go through the Senate, and then hopefully be passed on to the governor for a signature. That's just kind of a quick summary. Happy to answer any questions.
We will have to, because it has changed significantly, we should have to go back to the Assembly for concurrence.
Yes, I believe you're actually correct. Yes.
So we'll go Senate floor, Assembly floor, and then to the governor.
Yes.
Okay, board members, what questions or comments do you have? Okay, so I don't see or hear anyone, but Mark, could you expand a little bit on, I know one of the amendments was around some additional waivers for certain organizations. Can you talk to that?
Sure. The work group had raised concerns about certain groups such as Lions Club, community clinics, religious-based clinics that have established sort of models for this type of delivery. And what we wanted to do was make sure that those groups were exempted. So we included text that exempts nonprofit or charitable organizations that fit in the certain 501c categories that use volunteer optometrists engaging in the temporary practice of optometry. We included things like free clinics, community clinics. We also worked with Vision Service Plan and the California Optometric Association to include their exemptions for their free clinics that they do, just kind of working out with how their business models are. Again, we talked pretty extensively with the various stakeholders about this, and certainly with the author's office, and everybody appears to have their concerns taken care of.
Yeah, that was a pretty big change. So I'm glad we're able to get that in there.
And just also to note that the Vision Service Plan is comfortable with these changes as well, and they're continuing to work with us on this as well.
Okay, board members, one last chance before I open up to public comment.
It's Dave. Quick question.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, Mark, I know one of the issues that was brought up was with the one entity that actually contracts with optometrists to provide services, that would be contracting with to provide services under this bill. That entity hires them as per diem contractors. And is there something in the bill now that will exempt these specific folks from AB 5, or is that still going to be an issue that has to be dealt with somewhere else?
That to the best of my knowledge, that is not addressed directly in this bill. I'm not real sure, kind of, because that's kind of a bigger issue with temporary or with employment. I'm not quite sure how that will be addressed.
So we don't supersede. We don't have language specifically about contractor employment relationship between optometrists and these not-for-profit organizations that are contracting or hiring them. That is superseded by AB 5, and of course, as we know, is still an ongoing conversation and political issue. So this allows the mobile optometric clinics, but how they get those doctors in there is still up to them.
Yeah, it's like having a brand new car, but nobody's allowed to drive it.
Okay, any more comments or questions from the board? If not, moderator, could you please open up for public comment or questions?
Thank you. I have now opened the Q&A panel. So if you would like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists. And we are displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator, and Mr. Vice President, I'm seeing no request for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, any last comments on this? I do have one. I want to thank Dr. Turetsky and Dr. Wong, as well as Mark and staff, further work on this, working with Assemblyman Lowe's office. Appreciate that. Anybody else have any last questions or comments? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next item. What's the next item we're ready for, Shara? And Mark, are you ready? Okay, Mark's ready. So I'm going to let Mark take it back over.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Vice President. Which item are we going to now?
So I'm still waiting to see our regulatory counsel. She's of course covering. Oh no, Danny, I do see you here. All right. So we can move to our first regulatory package items, number 20, on continuing education regulations.
All right, who will be the presenter, if any?
Mark and Danny Rogers, our counsel.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mordomi. Is Danny online?
Yes, sir. Hello.
Danny?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, this is bringing back the continuing education regulations that the board had begun to look at in May 15, on the May 15th public meeting. As the board may recall, we had approved some changes to our regulations, which are set out in California Code of Regulations, Section 1536. And had sent, however, the reg back to the PEC for additional discussion on a couple of items. And the PEC discussed and returned it back to the board, and we're presenting it today for potential approval. So I'd probably first refer you to the first attachment for Section 1536, which is the actual text of the changes that we are proposing. This includes the changes that the PEC had made. So I'm going to touch on those changes just really briefly, and Danny or Shara, please jump in with any further thoughts or discussion. In subsection C1, the board had requested further discussion on the possibility of a required test, if it should be in there, and the PEC concurs that we should keep that test component in there. In subsection C1F, the board had added the words "any other technology the board chooses to adopt as adequate to accomplish this purpose." In discussions with our legal counsel, this was removed because it was just simply too vague to really address further technologies, at least at this point. Danny, did you want to add any thoughts to that, or Shara?
Hi, everyone. Danny Rogers. I don't really have any further thoughts, only to enlarge upon what Mark said, which is I didn't think it would withstand OEL scrutiny for clarity. It doesn't lend any guidance to the reader as to what technology the board would choose to consider adequate, so it would lend itself to being an underground regulation.
Okay. Moving along, subsection C4. We are recommending striking the words "in person" for the requirements of the for the 12-unit. Sorry, let me start over. We're recommending striking the words in person attendance, just specifically the words "in person" to describe if somebody wants to, as part of the self-study requirement, claim credit for participating in a board meeting. It's our understanding that DCA is working on technology that can track attendance online. So we are proposing to change it to a full day's substantiated attendance at a board meeting as verified by our board. And again, you can get up to a total of 4 credit hours. That's already in the regulation.
And board members, we know that as more boards and bureaus use WebEx and it evolves, DCA is working on the logging in of one screen name and the time at which it maintains connection to give us a log of that person having been in the conversation, much like currently or previous to COVID, when a licensee would sign in at the beginning of the board meeting and sign out at the end of the board meeting. This will give us a chance to still offer this credit and encourage licensees to be involved in our processes, though we know that things will likely stay on WebEx for a good deal of time, and have found that it does allow for greater public participation.
Okay. Going to section D2B, which was proposed. At the last PEC meeting, the California Optometric Association had made some points about their use of pre-recorded sessions for delivery of their content. So what the PEC and what we're proposing is to change the words, and this is to just differentiate live Q&A with a live instructional period versus a recorded Q&A. Just differentiating by saying the instructor presenting the content during the instructional period would count as live, a live lecture for the purposes of CE.
I have a question on that one, Mark. It's phrased in the singular, and a lot of these CEs have multiple instructors. Just to avoid questions in the future, what if 1 out of 5 instructors is available on the Q&A? Does that satisfy this regulation, or do all 5 have to be available?
It is our intention. So what we were most concerned about during the PEC discussion was that a presentation would be given by a renowned doctor, but then questions could be answered by any doctor, and giving clarity on what that presented material had been. So we wanted to make sure that it was clear that if you present in the recorded session, you need to be available in the online chat. But we hadn't gotten to the fact that, of course, then if you have 5 experts, you want those 5 experts to all be available, not just one of the experts who presented in the recording. So I think that we do have a small change in adding all of these. So allow participatory action between the licensee and all instructors presenting the content during the instructional period. And I think that will get at exactly what you're talking about, Mr. Morgomi.
Okay, thank you.
So Mark, if you'll just make that change, and we'll note that as we go through the motion.
Right. Okay. Moving along, subsection E3, the board changed the word courses to activities to better reflect the process set up by COPE. Just a simple note that the PEC agrees with that change. Subsection F, this is an addition made, I think, for our internal tracking, but also just to kind of help to help providers figure out better what they want to do in terms of how many hours they want to submit. So we're recommending the addition of credit hours desired for approval for each course, and then also educational category and learning objectives. This is to help the PEC to understand what has been submitted and what is being discussed. It helps board staff to track all of the courses that are submitted and to help categorize them. And we've included the course descriptions that COPE uses, so we can create a reference of educational categories that might be needed to complete this regulation.
So essentially, these are things that we ask on our form, but if we do not include them in the regulation or in the form by reference on the form, then they are in fact an underground reg. But it is often desired that we know if you're giving 2 hours of content, but your slides suggest that you are only having 5 slides, do you really expect that we would give 2 hours or 2 units of continuing education? And the credit hours desired for approval has helped the committee to make decisions regarding the number of hours and whether or not content provided is sufficient for the approval of that content. And I don't know if Dr. Wong or Dr. McIntyre would like to just discuss a little bit the conversation that went on regarding educational category and learning objectives. And then we can move to the determinations that we need the board to make in completing the regulation.
Just educational category just refers to if it's therapeutics, if it's glaucoma, and it just, again, it makes it easier for staff to know which category each of these continuing education courses are. Learning objectives, it's something we've always asked. It's just basically to know what they hope attendees will learn. So I think just this is basically, it's bookkeeping, but it makes it so much easier to evaluate each course, and it makes it easier for both the PEC as well as staff. And it's written very nicely on the new form so that people who are applying for CE can fill it out very easily.
And thank you, Dr. Wong. Dr. Wong, that's actually an excellent transition into the attachment that is incorporated by reference into section 1536, which is the application that it's our existing course approval application, and it is just updated to include the aforementioned to include the aforementioned learning objectives, to include the question about how many credit hours are desired for approval, and the educational category that is requested.
So what we've provided you members as your second attachment or third attachment for this item are the COPE educational or course category definitions, and then of course the individual categories underneath them. This is what we've often referred to, but we haven't clarified what the course categories are that we're asking potential presenters to provide. So I wanted to make sure that folks took a look at them today, and we could decide if we want to include a list of these things that are used within COPE, or the other option is to, by reference, include the COPE category definitions, this particular manual version, or a desire to do something completely different. But we've kind of talked around these categories and a need for them to be stated, but haven't given any flesh to the regulations so that it's clear what categories folks should be trying to fit themselves within. So it could be as easy as a reference to the COPE catalog, or it could be that we want to take a look at these A, B, C, and D categories and list actual categories within the regulation itself.
Shara, I think the majority of people who are giving the CE talks, they're familiar with, I mean, we can include the COPE as I guess, reference material for them, but the majority of people who are giving the CE talks are familiar with the categories. So when we're asking them to specify which category they're applying for, I think they'll probably already know, but it would be good to, I guess, have a reference in case anyone did have questions.
Okay, so then I think I'm hearing that if we included within the regulation back on page 50 to 51, include a reference to the COPE manual version. So.
It's either that or we could just have it posted on our website and as an electronic document. And if they have any questions, we could just refer them so that it's very easily accessible.
Plus, it would give you the flexibility if new categories are added. We're not already out of date here. And Dr. Wong, as long as you're on, can I ask a question? Are there any CEs that require an assignment to be completed, a test to be taken, what have you? Does that need to somehow be referenced, or this is strictly for coursework that requires attendance and only attendance?
Right. So usually in general, all live CE does not require any kind of like quiz or test at the end. And it's because you're physically there. So the assumption is that you are hopefully listening. Versus if it's a self-study, if it's something that's online or an article that you're reading, the only way to verify that you've actually done it is to have the quiz. Now the self-study only refers to optometric continuing education. So there are some medical articles and that do not have the self-study, but that falls under a separate category.
Okay. Yeah, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from board members? I have a question, probably for regulatory counsel. When we make reference to the COPE categories, do we have to tie it to a particular time or volume of these categories? I like the idea of having it flexible in that as technology changes and COPE might change the categories, that we don't have to go back in and change this regulation.
This is Danny Rogers. Yes, sometimes you can simply refer to standards and refer to the last revised version of the standards, but it just has to be clear enough to the reader what standards you're referring to. So if there's anything that you can do in the regulation to specifically point out which ones you mean, such as a website address or a particular title, that would be best. I would have to take an independent look at what you would be supposed to do.
Well, any of those above is okay with me. I don't want to wordsmith on the fly here, but can we approve this regulation and leaving it to you and staff to put in the appropriate language to express that intent?
Yeah.
I think that would be non-substantive as long as we're keeping the change minimal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quick question, Mark.
Go ahead, Dr. Tereski.
And Deborah or Lillian, maybe you would be the answer for this. Lillian, you mentioned like continuing medical education doesn't necessarily fall under any of this. So for CME or for courses in elder abuse and child abuse, which also count for CE, if those courses aren't going to be approved by the board, they're not going to go through that, and the providers of those courses might not meet certain requirements like keeping certificates on file for 4 years or something like that. Does that pose any issues with any of the changes we're making?
I don't know, Shara, do you know? I just know that, the only discussions that we had that was about non-optometric CE was the concern about the self-study, but then the medical CE fell in the other category. Is that right, Shara? So that's the reason why they didn't have to have a self-study. The keeping of the certificates,
not a requirement. So as it is a different part of the descriptions of courses that can be applied to the CE requirement, the medical education in itself, once granted by that American Medical Association tied entity, that is enough for our records. And it's not a requirement to keep certificates for more than 4 years. Where we want to make sure that happens is the courses that you as PEC committee members approve for applicability to the requirement.
I have a couple comments or slash questions. So my first comment is around glaucoma certification. So Sid, to kind of go back to your question, there is glaucoma certification that involves a continuing education glaucoma course, and then there's also a test at the end. It's one of the three requirements for those that did not graduate recently to get glaucoma certified. Um, but separately, my question to the PEC is around the 45-day submission. The 45-day, so I think this is kind of a sticky point for CE providers. With the 45-day submission requirement, it doesn't seem to also link to a commitment that we are promising to deliver an approval or denial within those 45 days. So did you guys discuss that at all? Because with the 45 days, if we're going to try to approve CEs within 45 days every time, that would require 2 meetings per quarter, correct?
Glenn, you're very observant. Yes. No, so that is one of the things that we did discuss. The issue was is that if we had originally, or Mark had originally had talked to us about extending it to 90 days, the problem is that a lot of the CE providers, especially for some of the larger lectures, don't submit their materials to the lecture coordinator 90 days in advance. So us asking for the materials 90 days in advance was being, I guess, a little bit optimistic. What we have decided, and what we're hoping to do anyway at the PEC, is to meet more often. In the past, we had PEC meetings almost once a month. And so this way, we're hoping to have PEC meetings more often. And then if people are missing materials in their applications, or if they're getting rejected and they have to come back, if we're meeting almost monthly, then we can review the courses more often. So the 45 days was the realization that a lot of lecturers for courses don't submit the materials in time. So if we ask for 90 days, they wouldn't submit it.
So my follow-up question to that then is with that, when applications are incomplete, but yet we're passing over the date of the delivery of the CE, is it creating burden on staff or the PEC with calls or requests from the applicant for the CE? Has that been an issue in the past, and are we going to be able to address that if it is an issue?
So I think right now what we have is that there's a list that has like applications complete and then incomplete applications, so that if you were to go online, Shara, correct me if I'm wrong, that people can see if their applications are incomplete. In regards to staff time, Mark or Shara, do you guys know how often the calls are coming in?
I think we get them. I think we get them occasionally. Our staff person, Christina, who handles the applications, does a very good job of keeping track of the very large amount of paperwork that we get for these applications. So I think that is a concern, that there are calls coming in. I think we handle those as best we can. So.
So I think though that if we were to have more often PEC meetings, it would be better. So
Okay.
that is the hope.
Thanks.
So what is the staff's pleasure? Shall we, are we ready? We need to get public comment on this. Excuse me, sorry.
All right, this is the moderator. I'll go ahead and open the Q&A panel. All right, it's now open. If you'd like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" in the field in the right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists for displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator, and Mr. Board President, I see no requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
With that, if there are no other comments by the board, I would invite a motion to approve the regulations, you may want to look at the board materials because I think the staff memo
There is a
has
suggested motion, yes.
suggested motion. And I guess subject to the amendment that I suggested. So would anyone like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion. It's Lillian.
I'll
Member
second
Wong,
it.
Member Wong makes the motion, and who seconded it?
McIntyre.
Dr. McIntyre
Yes.
seconds. Staff, do we need to read the motion into the record?
Please do.
Okay, Dr. Wong, if you don't mind.
Someone else read it. I can't. I'm on the wrong page in my.
All right, Dr. McIntyre, can you, and then we can have you make the motion and have Lillian second it.
Sorry.
This is do we have the motion in our board packet?
Yeah, I'm just on the wrong page.
Yeah, I'm having technological difficulties here, which is why I've been strangely
I'll be
quiet the
happy,
last few
I will be
minutes.
happy to read it on behalf of.
Please
Dr.
read the
Wong.
motion, please.
So Dr. Turetsky is making the motion now. Okay, very good.
I move to approve proposed changes to Title 16, Section 1536, and the Form CE01 as presented and discussed here today, and direct staff to submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to make any substantive, I can't say it either, Mark, non-substantive changes to the rulemaking package and set the matter for hearing.
From what I heard, I think that includes the change that we made given the breadth of that motion. So do we have a second?
I second Glenn.
I heard Glenn's name most clearly, so Glenn seconds. Let's go through and have a vote.
Our vote is from first Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky,
Hey,
Ms. Brandvine,
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre, aye, Dr. Kawaguchi,
Aye.
and Mr. Mordomi.
Aye. Okay,
All in favor.
motion passes. Next item.
Excellent. We'll move on to item 21.
Do we have a presentation? And is our representative from the optometry committee going to speak on this? Question mark. Shara?
Sorry, trying to minimize my background interference. Yes, so Adam Bentley is with us. Let's go ahead and we'll have him participate during the public participation or public comment portion of this item. We'll have, though, for the optician program regulations, we'll have Natalia Leeper, who's our interim lead licensing analyst, and Mark Johnson, our policy analyst.
Okay, so let's have staff speak, then I'll open it up for public comment and then board discussion.
Okay, I'm going to jump in and do I'll do the overview of what we're doing here. So, as the board well knows, we've been working on proposed statutory changes to our optician statutes. Blah blah blah. Sorry, can't speak today. We've been working on changes to our optician statutes for well over a year, and in that spirit, we wanted to propose some changes to the regulations for the optician program. What's important to kind of note here is that these changes are going to be restricted to just placing current initial registration and registration renewal forms that are used exclusively within the BREEZE system into regulation, and also to align current fees with the statute, and to make a couple of other non-substantive changes, such as just things like references to the board and division and things like that. So I think what we'll do is I'll just kind of quickly point out the additions that we're making to the text. And so if you would please refer to the second attachment, which is immediately following the memo, which just simply says optician regulations text at the top. And I could just point out the changes to you real quickly there, and then please jump in if you have any questions, or Char or Danny, if anybody has any questions, please jump in.
Mark, it's my observation that the registration requirements kind of repeat over and over again for each of the different classes of opticians. Am I right?
Yes, you are, Mr. Moridomi. We're trying to sort of cover. We're putting this into regulation. We're trying to cover all the questions that we ask or may potentially ask of the individual registration types.
Okay.
So that's one of the reasons for the redundancy, I think.
Right, and that's fine as you go through it. Rather than repeating yourself, you might want to mention how the information might change from type to type.
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I think the reason it was done this way, this is Natalia, is because normally how it used to be done is you would reference a form that was specific to that license type. And since the optician program doesn't use paper forms anymore, we've done away with them completely. This was what was given to us as an example to do by the legal office and legal counsel, to do in place of reference to a form. And normally that form would be copied into regulation.
So, similar to what Natalia was saying, when we were working on the AB 443, the immunization regulation, you remember last year, we had listed out the requirements for the form within the regulation as opposed to incorporating the form by reference, just because our expectation is maybe in 5 years we're going to be all digital on BREEZE for everything. So that's the reason we do it this way.
That's fine. I just don't want you to be. I'm trying to truncate your oral remarks. So
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So yeah, subsection A. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just point out each section and what the form is, but I won't go over the specifics. If anybody sees anything they want us to address, please jump in. Subset 1399.220 subsection A is going to be our registered dispensing optician initial application requirements.
Can I jump in already on you, Mark?
Absolutely.
1399.204. Right above that.
Yeah.
It mentions the executive officer. Where's all language in code is supposed to be non-binary, isn't it? Because it mentions the executive officer or his or her designee. Shouldn't it be their designee?
That is an excellent catch. Yes. Yes, it should be. Okay. Okay, so that would be a global change to go from his or her to they or their, using the non-binary language throughout the regulation. We will make that change. Okay. 1399.220 subsection B. This application is going to be the contact lens dispenser application, which just, of course, lists out our requirements for that. Subsection C will be the spectacle lens dispenser initial application for registration. And subsection D will be the non-resident contact lens dispenser initial application. Okay. So moving on to section 1399.222. This is the section where we put in the requirements for the renewal application for registration. Subsection A will be the registered dispensing optician renewal application with the requirements listed below. Subsection B is the spectacle lens dispenser renewal application. C, contact lens dispenser renewal application, and D, the non-resident contact lens dispenser renewal application. Okay. And if you scroll down to Article 6, it's about 3 pages down or so. We go to Article 6, fees. We are listing out all of the fees that are authorized in statute that we currently require. So the various fees are listed for registered dispensing optician, contact lens dispenser, the spectacle lens dispenser, and the non-resident contact lens dispenser. Additionally, we're deleting section 1399.262 refund of application fee. We do not refund those application fees anymore per, I think, Department of Consumer Affairs policy. Natalia?
Yes, it is a policy of DCA.
Okay. And that's it for the proposed changes. You'll notice that we didn't include some of the terminology and some of the changes that we do as part of the optician statutory changes. And that's mainly because we don't know what's going to happen with the statutory review process in terms of a legislative timeline. So we wanted to make these changes based on kind of what's in law currently and what we currently do, and just again restrict it to non-substantive changes, putting existing forms in the regulation, and just codifying fees that are already in place.
Any further questions by members of the board? Moderator, would you open this up to public comment, please?
Sure. All right, the question and answer panel is now available. If you'd like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" in the field in your lower right-hand corner of your screen and send it to all panelists. We're displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator, and we have a Joe Neville that would like to make a public comment. So, Joe, I'll let you know when you're unmuted. All right, Joe, you've been unmuted.
Good afternoon. Joe Neville with the National Association of Optometrists and Opticians. I have one question. It relates to section 1399.220, the applications for registration. And I'm specifically referring to A, having to do with the RDO initial application. I note that in A12, it requires the name and registration numbers of the CLD or SLD who'll be filling prescriptions for the registered dispensing optician. We talked about this several years ago. I think it was kind of labeled the decoupling conversation. And the issue is that when an optical firm is getting ready to open a business, frequently it will apply for its RDO license or registration well in advance of the time that it knows who the CLD or the SLD will be. And the agreement, or I think the decision that was made 3 years ago, was that that information would not be requested in the initial application, that the RDO would have to ultimately supply that information once they have someone. But in order to make sure that the application can be filled out completely when the company is ready to file, but before they may know who these people are, that this information would not be required initially. Thanks.
Staff, that Mr. Neville makes a very interesting point. Do we have a response, or does staff have a response?
This is Natalia. So Mr. Neville is correct. That is what we would like to happen. It doesn't always end up being the case. if I would be okay with making it optional, but there are quite a few businesses that do apply after they've already opened. And we do tend to like to work with them and make sure they do get licensed. So they usually do open ahead of time. Not that we would like them to. So I would like to keep it there as at least an optional. Because there are people who may be open already and we ask them to be licensed, whether it be through us or enforcement, so we can gather that information all at the same time.
So what language change would need to happen so that it is optional? Because as I read it now, it's probably required.
Danny, can I put you on the spot? Maybe you help a little bit with figuring this out. I don't know if we could say this
If available.
this information must be supplied before the business opens. Or I don't know, something like that.
We're talking about 220 subdivision 12.
220 subdivision A, subsection A, number 12.
Yeah.
You suggested if available.
Oh, I didn't understand the point. Sorry about that.
What about when available?
So you want to build in flexibility to allow them to supply it whenever it's available. If so, then that would be appropriate. When available or if available. When would be more precise, as you've suggested.
Or just adding the words if available to number 12. So it'd say name and registration numbers of the contact lens dispenser or spectacle lens dispenser who will be filling prescriptions for the registered dispensing optician, comma, if available.
When available would be my preference. I think that's an even better suggestion.
Okay.
I'm sure if anybody has a contrary opinion.
Okay.
Any moderator, I believe that's our last. No, excuse me. There is another public commenter. Why don't we open it up for them?
Correct. So Adam Bentley would like to make a public comment. So Adam, you've been unmuted.
Hello, everyone. So to Mr. Neville's point, a business can, to get our application to open a location can be upwards of like 6 weeks prior to opening, where typically hiring may not even happen, a few weeks before a location's opening. But as far as thinking about wording, possibly making sure that we're supplying an RSLD or contact lens dispenser information prior to the business opening, if that could be the wording, that, you don't have to supply it now, but as long as we have this information prior to the business opening, so that there is a time frame essentially. So we're setting an expectation that prior to the business opening, you are supplying this information.
Yes, Mark, if you and our regulatory counsel can digest that, and when available might do it, but I still have a little bit of discomfort as to whether or not it does the trick. But I don't want to hang this regulation up based on wordsmithing. Do we have any more comments from the members of the public?
This is the moderator, and no, we do not. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have one additional question for legal counsel, or request from legal counsel. And I'm looking at, hold on, the non-resident seller fee, 1399.264, non-resident contact lens seller fees. So if I'm reading the title correctly, for someone who does not reside in California, if they want to sell contact lenses, they need to pay this fee. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
This is Natalia. That's correct. It's our out-of-state contact lens seller license.
Okay. I would ask counsel to review the legality of that provision before we send it over to the Office of Administrative Law.
So, Mr. Mordomi, just to clarify, this is already in statute. This is just matching it with statute. So those fees are in statute, and
Okay.
we're just doing this to match.
Okay. I withdraw my request.
I can certainly check the statute while we're online. It does appear that the citation for those fees are Business and Professions Code 2546.9. Like me to?
All right. I'll withdraw my request.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any further comments, questions by the members of the board? All right. I would entertain the appropriate motion.
I can try to do that if you want, Mark.
Right, because we've also made some changes to the regulatory package. So,
all right. So I move to approve proposed changes to Title 16, Sections 1399.220 through 1399.285, the California Code of Regulations as presented and discussed here today, including but not limited to the initial RDO application. Is that good enough, or do I need to cite the specific section?
I think that's good enough.
Okay. And direct staff to submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review. And if no adverse comments are received, authorize executive officer to make any non-substantive changes to the rulemaking package and set the matter to hearing.
all right. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
I think that sounded like Member Brandwein. Thank you. Your pictures don't show up on my screen, so. All right. If there's no further discussion, let's put this to a vote.
Do we need to, do we have to open it to any more, but we already did our public, didn't we?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
excuse me, we'll put that to vote. Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky, Dr. Turetsky. Are you still with us? Did we lose him?
This is the moderator. I'm not seeing him in the panelist list. I'm looking in the attendees and not seeing him there either.
Do we want to wait then until we get him back?
I think we should probably wait because he's essential for our quorum.
Oh God, do I have to repeat that motion?
The motion's still on the table. We might need to summarize it for Dr. Turner when he comes
We can,
back.
should we do the rest of the voters?
I'm
Just
sorry,
wait.
Sid, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you what you said.
Do the rest of the roll call and wait for Dr. Turetsky?
Or start over?
Yeah.
My concern is we don't have a quorum, so we don't have a meeting. So we
Members, may I? I am on the phone with Dr. Turetsky. He's going to try to call in. Apparently within Santa Cruz County, there's an issue with Xfinity internet delivery. We are trying to troubleshoot through it. But of course, there is the issue of quorum now that Dr. Turetsky is not with us.
He can dial in by phone, correct?
This is a moderator. Yes, that's correct. And hold on. I'll put the phone number in the chat.
One of the things that we had discussed while on right before we came back was the fact that there might be rolling power outages. So should we just share that phone number to everybody, just in case somebody loses complete power, can't be on the computer?
I just looked that up, and right now it looks all clear. I think our governor was just warning us that we've got excessive power use due to the heat, particularly between 3 and 8. And I just checked the PG&E site. It doesn't look like it's down in Santa Cruz.
So he is trying to call in now. This is actually an existing issue. We were working this yesterday as well. And fortunately, his phone was able to work, although his internet was not. Today, he's having issue with phone signal too. So we're trying our best, and we'll move him to a landline if he's got one, and that's what we have to do.
What, a landline? I had to get rid of mine. I actually really like my landline and I miss it.
But you're right, Dr. Kawaguchi, having the phone number wouldn't hurt.
This is the moderator, and I'm happy to give that phone number. It's area code 415-655-0002. Again, that's 415-655-0002.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more?
Sure. That number again is area code 415-655-0002.
Is there an event ID or that needs to be entered?
It might ask for that, and if it does, hold on. The event ID is 145-428-5458. And one more time, that event number is 145-428-5458.
Actually, there's also a attendee ID. Is that required for us to get in?
Shouldn't be. There is a password. So if you, and that is the word optometry with a capital O, and then 8-14-20.
Moderator, now that the world knows how to access the meeting, I assume you have the power to include or exclude individuals, for public comment and non-public comment, right?
Well, if anyone logs into the meeting, they're automatically muted.
Okay.
And if they sign on with an offensive name, I can expel them.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Turetsky is caller user 5. He is able to hear, but there is an issue with our being able to hear him.
This is the moderator, and Dr. Turetsky, I've unmuted you. Can you say something?
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you. Kind of faint, but we can hear you.
Okay, good enough.
Okay, so if you go ahead and mute yourself, you'll be able to mute and unmute yourself at will.
I am muted.
Actually, David, before you mute yourself, when did we lose you? Have you heard the motion?
I heard you say I call this meeting to order.
Great.
What was the motion to, it was just before I think you made the motion, Joe Neville's comments were in there and you were talking about waiting until he had licensees to put on the form. And that's where I lost it.
All right, so Glenn, I think you have to make the motion again.
Okay, so I move to approve proposed changes to Title 16, Sections 1399.220 through 1399.285 of the California Code of Regulations as presented and discussed here today, including but not limited to the initial RDO application changes, and direct staff to submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to make any non-substantive changes to the rulemaking package and set the matter for hearing.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. Member Kawagashi moves. Member Brandvine seconds. Madam Secretary, can we do the vote again, please?
President,
Absolutely.
we may wish to take additional public comment now that the motion has been made, and I know we've had people dropping off and coming on, just in case.
I have no objection to that, moderator. Does anyone want to add more public comment?
This is the moderator, and I've opened up the Q&A panel. So if anyone would like to make public comment, please type you'd like to make public comment and send it to all panelists. This is the moderator, and I see no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you.
All right, now let's take a vote.
Okay, we'll start with Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky,
Aye.
Ms. Brandvine,
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre, aye, Dr. Kawaguchi,
Aye.
and Mr. Mordomi.
Aye. Okay, the motion appears to pass unanimously. Let's move to the next item.
And if we could, President Mordomi, we'd like to skip to item number 23 so as to make this the last item that Danny Rogers, Regulatory Counsel, will need to be on the line for.
That sounds like a good idea.
And our presentation will be from Assistant Executive Officer Cherie Kimball, as well as Natalia Lieber, our interim licensing lead.
Good afternoon, board members. So this is the Optometry disciplinary guidelines. They are obviously the guidelines that are specific to our opticianry licensees. They have come before the board. They've been drafted mainly by the Dispensing Optician Committee with some input recently from the CPC. The updates that were made at the last CPC, we added some definitions to terms 25 and 26, the mental health evaluation and the medical health evaluation. We added some clarity to the probation monitoring cost language. And let's see, for the mental health evaluation, we updated it so that it was a little less confusing, as well as the medical health evaluation term. And we changed all of the references to registered dispensing opticians to dispensing ophthalmic businesses, which is the updated language we'll be using. Once the CPC had concluded, we made the requested changes, and those were reviewed and approved by Dr. McIntyre. Also included in this is the quarterly report of compliance form and the notice to employers form. Both of those are included in the regulation by reference, so they are here for your approval as well. And what the staff is asking for is if you have any additional feedback, or if you and we're recommending approval of the rulemaking package. Are there any questions or any additional feedback for the disciplinary guidelines?
So members, do you have any comment or questions for staff? I have one question, and that is, we've seen a few opticians come before us in disciplinary matters, and they're not as, being an optician is not a very highly paid profession. I am concerned that for a minor violation, we impose probation with the consequent probation costs. Now, optometrists may be able to do all that and continue with their careers, but for an optician, would those costs be basically career killing? And has there been any thought and discussion about that at the DOC or elsewhere?
So the cost of probation is something that we consider for our opticians in particular, because we are aware of the disparity between what they're earning in a year versus what an optometrist is earning in a year. And that is something that we consider during the disciplinary process. One thing to note in the disciplinary guidelines themselves, there is towards the end recommended discipline based on violation. So this is going to be on page 1, starting on page 139 of your packet. This lists out the violations that we take disciplinary action for and what those recommendations are. So we are typically not taking action against an optician for, maybe just failure to correctly fit eyeglasses. It's for things like, most commonly, it's conviction of a substantially related crime. But there are other violations that are listed here. But like I said, we are typically not going to take action against somebody for a minor violation. That's something where we might use an educational letter or a citation and fine.
Thank you. So remind me, sometimes we get cases here of people who are applying. They've just recently been released from prison. And then I think we would impose probation upon those folks. Is that a function of these disciplinary guidelines?
Yes, that's where we get the probation terms for those specific applicants that have a considerable conviction history, and we go through that process to put them on probation. This is where those terms will come from.
Okay, and so what evaluation happens? Someone comes out of prison, and granted for a very, very serious crime, but let's say they've served, 20 years in prison, and now they're coming out to us and have successfully completed any parole or whatnot, and they submit an application and say to us, "I've been clean for 25 years. I haven't done anything wrong since I've gotten out." The staff automatically, or the ALJ automatically impose the probationary conditions, or is that subject to consideration and adjustment?
So we have no mechanism to automatically impose the probation. What happens is we would review the conviction history and we look at certain things, including their rehabilitation, the nature and gravity of the acts and offenses, how long it's been since those convictions. These are all listed out on page 118 in your packet. So that'll give you kind of a better idea of what we look at when we're making a decision on an applicant's conviction history. Once we've done that, if we decide that the convictions maybe are so substantial that we don't feel that it's appropriate to give them a free and clear registration, we deny their application for registration. They have then the opportunity to appeal that denial. And it's at that point that the case would go to the Attorney General's office, we file what's called a statement of issues, which is a charging document that says these are the violations of the law we feel that have been committed. And it either goes in front of a judge, or maybe we will negotiate probation terms with the applicant. And then once we have either a proposed decision from a judge or a stipulated settlement, then that comes before you as board members to either adopt or reject.
Okay, so if I have it correctly, at the staff level, initially all you have the power to do is do a revocation, but then later staff has the ability to negotiate probation or negotiate the terms of the probation. All right. Why don't we open it up to members of the public?
All right. I will open up the Q&A panel. All right, so the question and answer panel is now available. If you would like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists. We're displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator, and I'm seeing no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Sharia, I have one more question. So the applicant comes in, makes the application, it's revoked because of prior criminal history. What notification or information do you provide the applicant? Do you say it's revoked, but you can appeal with an ALJ hearing, or do you also say it's revoked, you can appeal with an ALJ hearing, or you can contact us and we can negotiate a settlement?
So the information that we provide with an application denial includes their appeal rights. So we tell them the amount of time they have to initiate an appeal of their denial. We give them the code sections that come into play. And I'm not sure how much of the process gets explained in that letter, but we do make sure that they are aware that they have appeal rights. And then sometimes if the applicant has more questions, they might call in and speak to the analyst who worked the case. And that analyst can then kind of give them an overview of how the process might work. Whether it goes to a hearing or to where we negotiate settlement terms, it still goes to the AG's office and we still file a statement of issues. So that part of the process is still the same.
Okay. I know that process still makes me feel a little uncomfortable. I mean, that's really not the subject of these guidelines. I would like to see a typical letter to at a later point, or a de-identified letter to a person whose application was rejected, because these folks may not have the highest of education, and to tell them you can appeal and go through yet another set of hearings can be quite daunting when there may be some flexibility through negotiation. So, so that's my comment. I can follow up with staff outside this hearing to gather more further information. Do board members have any further comments? If not, I would invite a motion to approve these guidelines. Anyone?
I'll motion to approve these guidelines.
Is there special language we need, regulatory counsel or counsel?
There is a suggested motion on that.
Since David does not have access to the computer, Mark, do you mind reading?
I have access to it.
Okay.
So Dave, if you want to retract your motion.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, you didn't say.
I
Okay. So
retract.
let me.
I retract.
Okay. Let me go ahead and read it. I move to approve the proposed text for California Code Regulations Title 16, Section 1399.273, the Optician Disciplinary Guidelines in Forms OPTC-NE1 and OPTC-QR1, incorporated by reference as presented and discussed here today, and direct staff to submit the text to the Office of Administrative Law for posting for a 45-day public comment period, and if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all necessary steps to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the package, and set the matter for hearing.
Do we have a second?
All right, this is Dave. I'll second it.
Dr. Tureski seconds. Any further discussion? Let's proceed to a vote.
Okay, going to vote. Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky,
Aye.
Ms. Brandvine,
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre, aye. Dr. Kawaguchi,
Aye.
and Mr. Mordomi.
Aye. So it sounds like the motion passes. Let's proceed to the next item.
Excellent. We can move to the item 22, move back to the optician program statutes.
All right, staff presentation.
This is Natalia. I'll be presenting the statutory review memo. So this is to bring back the memo that the board looked at some time ago at the May 15th meeting. And the DOC, it was sent back to the DOC to be reviewed, and the DOC reviewed both the board's comments as well as public comments that were received at the May 15th meeting. And so this memo is to address which changes the DOC accepted and which they rejected or declined to make changes to, I should say. So we'll go ahead and start off with the DOC, the changes DOC declined to accept, which would be 2545B1. Dr. Koguchi supports raising the limit of the fine, but is concerned about the possible risk of consistency in the application of the fines over the years and asked it would make sense to include baseline or the use of multipliers. Staff notes that fine levels can potentially be handled in regulation. The DOC declined to accept this change. Are there any comments from board members on this change? No. Okay. Moving on to 550.1C. Actually, it might be best. Are there any comments any board members have instead of me going through each individual one?
I have a comment.
Okay, Dr. McIntyre.
The comment here was that it was felt that the definition does not make sense as written, and then the DOC declined to make changes. Well, it makes perfect sense if you replace a comma with a colon after in combination with others. Colon. That one comma is what I think throws it all off. So if you reread that, would you like me to read that out loud? Or people can take a look at this on your own if you'd like.
If you would like to read it out, Dr. McIntyre, it would be appreciated.
Sure. So part of 2555.1C. Fit and fitting means doing any or all of the following acts prior to the act of adjusting either singly or in combination with others. And this is where I believe the comma should be replaced with the colon. So now you are listing designing, the taking of measurements to determine the size or shape of specifications, or replacing the prescribed optical aids pursuant and incidental to the filling of any prescription for lenses, spectacles, eyeglasses, contact lens, plano contact lens, and other ophthalmic devices as specified in section 2541 and prescriptions. If someone else can look at that and make sure I'm not misreading that, because I believe that is the list that they said was not there. It was there, it was simply not set off properly with punctuation. Is anybody else able to look at that?
Council, do you understand
Yeah.
Member McIntyre's comment, and does it address all the concerns?
I think so. Were you suggesting to place the colon after the word others?
Yes.
Yeah, I think with that change, that would help.
And that also helps in the next subsection of D, the same issue in combination with others, colon, adapting, delivering. And it makes it make complete sense after that.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay. Natalia, you want to continue?
Yes. Were there any other comments regarding any of the changes DOC declined to make?
Yes, so I can go ahead. Should I go ahead?
Yes.
So it's disappointing that if you look at the litany of comments that I made, that none of those were taken into account in change initiated. And there's also no detailed explanation of why. So when I look at our desire to move forward on legislation, and this is to my fellow board members, it's a reflection of us when we seek legislative action. And if it is not ready for bill form, it's going to be a reflection of us, and it's going to create a lot of work as we move through that legislative process. I know this has been going on for quite a while, that it has, but at the same time, I just want to let everybody know that I'm not going to be able to support moving this forward as is at this time.
So, Glenn, in that regard, we're putting kind of Natalia in the middle as kind of the conduit. I'd like to open this up to public comment, so that perhaps Adam, who might be on the line, can further address the concerns that you raised and why the DOC chose not to incorporate them. We're the board, so we can disregard or regard whatever the DOC has done before we propose it. It's up to us. I also note that the legislative process is a give and take. So we may want to propose some language that we're willing to change or we plan to change later on in the legislative process, rather than shooting our wad at the beginning. But moderator, can you open up to public comment?
Thank you. And the question and answer panel is now available. So if anyone would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. All right, so we have Adam Bentley who'd like to make a comment. Adam, you've been unmuted.
Hello, I'm happy to help with any of the comments. So I was trying to run through here. Dr. Kawaguchi, are there specific ones that you'd like to, I don't know if, am I allowed to have a dialogue on this, or am I only allowed to make a comment?
You can, technically speaking, you cannot have a dialogue. However, the method of doing this is if you make your comments through the chair, then you are addressing me, and those comments will be heard by Dr. Kawaguchi, and he can respond through the chair. So it's a bit of a dialogue, but I'd like to, I may control a little bit so it's not, so it doesn't get too out of hand. But let's give it a go, because we need the information.
Yeah, of course, I'm happy to help. I'm here to help. Let's see.
So, Dr. Kawaguchi, are there particular ones that you are most concerned about, or you'd like further explanation on why the DOC did not want to adopt your changes?
I would just start out the first one. I think that's one of the bigger ones. 2545B1 about fine limits.
So that's the $1,000 to $50,000 fine range.
Yes.
You know, unfortunately, I don't have, because I know what I remembered. What stood out to me was the use of multipliers, and I don't remember the exact dialogue around that because I believe that was conversation with legal counsel. Natalia, I don't know if Natalia would be able to share any specifics on that, but I know it dealt specifically with multipliers, but unfortunately I don't remember exactly the comments that we made.
I'm pulling the committee meeting notes right now, trying to find them.
Well, as you're looking for them, I noted Dr. Kawaguchi's concern. I started off with that same concern, but upon reflection, it's not that big of a concern for me at this point, because I would imagine that would be negotiated during the course of the legislation. But that was my position. People could very easily disagree with that position.
So one of the things that I personally experienced through the legislative process is the author's office often asks, or committees often ask, have key stakeholders been involved in the process, and is everybody in agreement? And I don't think that we would be able to confidently say yes to that when, obviously, if we also look at the other comments by the NAOO, very few of those were taken into account as well. So again, I just feel like we're moving this forward when it's still not ready. Again, that's just my personal opinion. I don't think it's appropriate for us as a board today to go through each of the points. There's just still too many. It would take us an entire prep to go through. So I just wanted to express to the board my recommendation, which is not moving forward to legislative process at this time with this. But you know, it's up to you to make your personal decisions.
So, Natalia and Adam, do you have any further comments precisely on this, the fines? Because it is a significant issue, and that I think the board should hear your thinking on it.
Right, and I do have the discussion we did have at the DOC meeting, and it is quite substantive on this specific issue that Dr. Kawaguchi raised. Would you like me to read it out to you, or would you like to give you a summary?
A summary was probably best for now.
Okay. It seemed that the committee members, including specifically Mr. Casella, deemed that the recommended fine range is appropriate. And then there was a comment that we have established a broad range of fines. Anything else is tying hands. That is the gist of the DOC comments.
Okay. Adam, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so I do believe, reading the comment again, we were looking at, because remember the comment from the NAOO was also that it was targeting larger businesses, and that I think as it's written, we're able to, I think it's just targeting the individual instance rather than targeting the, because I know it's like rather than, because I think we were fine with it, because what was happening was we're looking at, like, if it's one instance, one individual, like obviously that individual will be fined, or that RDO would be fined. But if that RDO had multiple locations, then because it's like, is it the RDO that is it a consistent issue at every single location with this RDO, or is it that individual RSLD that is being fined? So I think we left it as is.
Was there any discussion about further delineating the gradations between 1,000, 50,000, which I think Glenn was suggesting?
There was a point made by both the board and Shar Murphy that whatever fines would be levied, it would be the board that would levy those fines. So ultimately, even if we did decide this, the multiplier would be decided by us entirely, from what I understand from reading.
I think the answer was that the board by regulation would determine the gradations.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. We can have further board discussion. At this point, we're trying to get information. Glenn, are there any other particular ones you want to have staff specifically address, or was your, I mean, I get your ultimate position, but are there any other particular ones that you want staff or our DOC representative to address precisely?
No, I mean, again, there's just too much. I mean, the amount of time that I took to review their proposal, we don't have the time to do that in today's meeting. I'm hoping that the rest of the board members had time to also be thoughtful in their review of this proposal to see if they feel that it's close enough for a legislative process, with, and I'm going to use the word, with the hope that if it does go through, that in the regulatory process, we're able to not just protect consumers, but be fair and equitable for providers.
All right, that's a great way of posing the question for the board. All right, so is there anything more from the staff or, excuse me, is from the staff or Adam, at least for your initial presentation, that you'd like to state at this time? Okay, are there any other moderator, any other individuals that wish to make a public comment?
Yes, we have Joe Neville that has requested to make a public comment. So, Joe, you've been unmuted.
Thank you very much. Hello again, everyone. I think I have 4 or 5 sections of the proposed changes that are of concern, and kind of respecting Dr. Kawaguchi's maybe we're moving a little too fast approach. I think there's more conversation that should be had on a number of these. I mean, these are issues that we would bring up in the legislative context, but would like to see if they can be resolved before it gets to that point. Real briefly, for example, there's a provision in 2555U that requires that an optician refer a customer who doesn't have an up-to-date prescription. And I'm concerned that I don't know how that would be monitored. I don't know how that would be regulated. I'm concerned about lawsuits that would result if somebody doesn't have a good record about that. We've also raised some issues about 2559.15, dealing with customary absences and the registrant to unlicensed assistant ratio, which those allowances have been in place for decades, and now there's a proposal to add regulation here when there's no particular public need for it, and a few others like that we'd like to continue the conversation on. I congratulate the board for the WebEx approach, but these sometimes limited conversations make it hard to get points in, but I'll commit to you that if discussions continue, we will write a nice, concise note to the board about what our concerns are so that you can more easily deal with it, perhaps at the next DOC meeting. So thank you very much.
Any other members of the public that wish to speak?
This is the moderator, and we have no further requests for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you.
Any further discussion by the board? I heard Mr. Neville suggest that we continue to discuss it at the DOC. I'm not sure that step would be productive because the DOC has heard from Mr. Neville. He's and Dr. Kawaguchi and others, and had a discussion of the statute and considered those comments. If we're going to postpone this, and I'm not sure what my position is on that, I think we have to have the full discussion here at the board. I think the next step is to have a full discussion of the board on the statutory proposal, and not send it back to the DOC. But let me shut up and let members of the board express their opinions.
Mr. President, this is Sid.
Yes.
My recommendation is that we postpone moving forward and perhaps engage a joint conversation between Ledge and Reg and the DOC, because I'm hearing multiple things. Not only are there concerns in the language specific to the DOC community, but there's also concerns in the language, and clarification and confusion and clarity needs to be brought forward. Because if we have members who are confused now, it will only be more confusing when somebody comes before us for a disciplinary action. And then the interpretation begins. The more we could bring clarity now and not just assume that clarity will come going through the process, I think the better served the consumer will be in the long run. That's it.
Any other members commenting?
This is Dr. McIntyre. Sid, thank you. I agree. I'm not going to go through all the points that I'd highlighted and wanted to talk about. Mr. Neville can approach a couple of those. There's one, though, that I was really concerned about, because at our last board meeting, I made a specific comment and said this needs to be reworded. It was reworded in this document, but it was reworded only to further make it not what I wanted it to be. So I just wanted to point it out, because this could come back to bite us. It is regarding, it's on a board packet, page number 105. It was section 2564.76, subsection C. What I was trying to do was make it, word it such that a dispenser could not substitute a different manufacturer, brand, or physical property of the lens. And in the rewording, it makes it sound as if they cannot alter the color, but may substitute a different manufacturer, brand, or other physical property of the lens. So I've reworded it again. I can state it now for the record if we want to get it into our minutes, so we can look at this later on. But I believe that should state a dispenser shall not alter, other than color, any of the specifications of an ophthalmic lens, such as different manufacturer, brand, or other physical property of the lens. And that is the point I was trying to make.
Any other member comments? Any other member comments? All righty. So what is the pleasure of the board? Is there a motion to approve, a motion to, or a request to reschedule? I guess if the motion doesn't pass, if a motion to approve doesn't pass or is not made, then we need to decide where to send the draft next. So I'm open to suggestions. Well, let's start off this way then, to force a decision. Is there a motion to go forward and approve the proposed language to amend the optician statute? Well, for the sake of discussion, I will move. Then the question is there a second, or will my motion die for lack of a second? All right, so it sounds like my motion dies for lack of a second. Okay, so the next question then is, and I don't know whether the board needs to discuss this or not, or decide upon this. It is my personal opinion that this needs to be brought back to the board after further, or actually, excuse me, I heard another suggestion that it be sent to Ledge Reg with and including discussion with the DOC. I'm not exactly sure procedurally how to do that, to have that joint discussion, but I'll leave that to the lawyers. But it seems like the core of it is to send this to Ledge Reg.
Does DOC need to look at it again first before it goes to Ledge Reg? If you're gonna have DOC and Ledge Reg look at it, we might as well just have the whole board look at it.
The only reason I was suggesting that is to maybe sunset a few of these comments so that we're not using the board meeting to make it a working session that perhaps the committee could make progress on. But I'm happy one way or another to make a motion that this goes back to committee. And
It's Dave. Can this go back to the DOC? And now that Glenn is on the DOC, maybe it can be re-examined and brought back to the board, the full board.
So let me make a comment. So this has gone back to the DOC multiple times over the course, I think, of the last year. It also went back to Ledge Reg, but that was right. The most recent time was right before COVID happened. And so there was a little struggle because I think, and Cheryl will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that a planned meeting that we intended to have did not happen because of stay-at-home orders. And so it kind of threw a little loop into that because we had Ledge Reg able to discuss it as a committee. So perhaps sending it back to the Ledge Reg with our current format of WebEx would be helpful. I don't think sending it back to the DOC, even with my presence, at this time would be that valuable yet. So that's just my thoughts about what historically has been going on.
So then I take back my suggestion. So I'm on Ledge Reg. So I think if you're going to send it to Ledge Reg, which you're right, we didn't have our meeting right at the beginning and start of COVID. It might be a good idea for the DOC to meet with the Ledge Reg so that we can really kind of like hash everything out and then bring it back to the board.
So, council, do we need a motion to do that, or can I deem, through my powers of the presidency, to send things to committee, that would be the action absent strong objection by other board members?
I think you can deem it if it's the consensus of the board or your direction. I don't think it's an official action since we're just not adopting anything today. You guys can consider whatever you deem appropriate in your.
Okay,
needs.
so to save some time, I would like to send this through my powers of the presidency, assign this to the Ledge-Reg committee for the Ledge-Reg to meet, however legally, with a DOC to hash out, to use that legal term, these differences, or at least consider these differences. And after that discussion happens, to send it back to the full board. I don't expect all the differences to be resolved. I mean, there's some, Mr. Neville's position might be may be wrong, the DOC might be wrong, or Glenn might be wrong, but we just kind of work with it, find out what the pros and cons are, and we vote ultimately. But I think Ledge-Reg is a good place to hash those out. Are there any objections to that proposal? All right, hearing none. Action item 22 fails for lack of a second to my motion, and I think that concludes item 22. Staff, Shara, any further comment?
No, I think we have clear direction that there hasn't been enough discussion where parties could sit down and look at the ways in which a moderated or a middle ground could be found. And so I think that going to Ledge-Reg and council can help us in how we make sure the DOC is included in that, as Dr. Kawaguchi is a member of both. I think we could simply call a meeting of the Ledge-Reg and invite the DOC members to participate and have this deep dive discussion and really kind of hash it out in legal terms.
The only question I'm going to raise here, this is Sid, is based on the number of board members that we're at today, I'm wondering if that will be quorum of the board and therefore interfere with a joint meeting.
I don't think it will be because I'm not on Ledge-Reg.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, board members. I think we're moving in the right direction. Staff, sorry about that, but we gotta feel comfortable with what we present to the legislature.
No, certainly, and we appreciate board members having the conversation and willing to do the work. We certainly want to put a product forward that is representative of the board's feelings on the moving forward within this profession, and get an opportunity for there to be more dialogue. So thank you for that.
Shara, I've lost my place. What's the next item?
So the last item, the last two items we have are the executive officer's report. So going through our statistics and enforcement, and then any updates from committee meetings. But most have been incorporated by agenda item here today, and then a future agenda items for today, and followed by adjournment. So we'll move to executive officer's report and the enforcement program, if that so pleases the board.
Go ahead. Char, is that you?
Hello, this is
I think she just left. Oh no, she's coming back. She's coming back. She's coming back. Sorry.
Yes. All right.
Hi, can you guys hear me? This is Matt McKinney, enforcement analyst of the board.
Yes.
Hey there. So in the enforcement report, we covered the work we did for the last fiscal year, and we provided charts in the attachments, which have statistics for the final quarter of FY 1920, as well as for the full fiscal year. Currently, there are 3 analysts investigating optometry enforcement cases with an average of 54 cases per analyst. and there's 1 analyst working optician cases with a caseload of 73 cases. Additionally, there are 15 optometry and 19 opticianry cases that are closed pending the completion of criminal court cases. And at the last board meeting, we were requested to provide some information on probationers in consideration of the current pandemic. And so we currently have 14 active probationers. Of those, we've had requests to accommodate conditions 6, which is function as an optometrist or optician respectively, and condition 10 for community services from 4 of the probationers. And we've had 1 request to accommodate condition 4, which is probation monitoring costs, and 8 cost recovery from 1 probationer. So that's what we have for you today. Thank you.
So can you repeat those statistics as to cases per person?
Sure.
Or per staff person? I thought that was very interesting, and I only got the tail end of that.
Yeah, there's 3 analysts investigating optometry enforcement cases with an average of 54 cases per analyst, and 1 analyst working optician cases with a caseload of 73 cases.
Thank you. Do we have any questions about the enforcement report from board members? I have one question, and I'm sorry. This harkens back to the environmental scan from yesterday. So if you don't have it in front of you, I'll read it. And I should have mentioned this yesterday, but I noted in the enforcement performance measures the days for investigation. And so our target for investigation in terms of days is 90 days. That's ambitious. In 2016, 2017, it's 100. The actual was 133 days. In 2017, 2018, it was 142 days for investigation. But in 2018, 2019 is 222 days. So that seemed like a pretty big jump. Do we have an understanding of what caused that increase in the amount of days for investigation?
Sheree, if you could, I can anecdotally, but if you could have perhaps lead some clarity to the increase in days for enforcement cases.
Most commonly, the increase in days is going to be because we had limited staff resources at the time. Our case investigations can be very lengthy overall because they often include the Division of Investigation, who has larger caseload than just us. They also go sometimes to expert witnesses for review and the preparation of an expert witness opinion, and that can typically add some time to that. The time frame that you're speaking to, though, I believe our biggest issue was just staff resources.
Thank you. Although I actually noticed that the complaint volume went from 41 to 77, so that could also explain it.
And that was my anecdotal too, Sheree. Perhaps we can take a look at this at a couple of different turns, but because also since 2016, our caseload has looked different in that it often it requires a referral to enforcement upon application for someone who might have previous convictions, in which case we are waiting for legal documents that need to be obtained from several jurisdictions and then analyzed by the analyst before it can go and move to the Attorney General for some consideration, and finally to the board for a decision upon probation if it's not a license granted outright.
Thank you. It's something that we all need to keep an eye on. All right.
I have a follow-up question for Matt. So Matt, I know that you mentioned around COVID and the request for waivers for probationers. um, are we taking a proactive approach so that probationers know that they can request a waiver, or are we waiting for them to contact us to tell us that they're struggling with their probation because of COVID? Like, what's the process looking like at ground level?
So I recently took over the probation monitoring, and part of doing that was I reached out to all the active probationers just to let them know that they could contact me with any questions or concerns with probation, and just kind of briefly, without going into detail, like, let them know that if there's anything COVID related, to let us know, what's going on, and we can evaluate at that time. But so, I mean, it's been proactive in that sense, but then as far as like anything we do with the information is not really been acted upon, if that makes sense. We're kind of like just filing, I guess, what kind of information they're providing back to us in terms of like the difficulties they're having and what they can do with the limitations that they're under.
So when you do have a probationer let you know that they're, for example, unable to complete their community service, then how fast is our decision process at staff level to let them know what we feel is appropriate or what the solution is?
So in terms of like a number of days, I'd feel like we get back to them pretty quickly, but I don't know, I could give you a specific number of days off the top of my head. But it's more just been like I was trying to explain to let them know more, like, thank you for letting us know, and we haven't really taken any further action than to file that information, than, as far as like considering violations of probation or anything like that with it.
So, okay, so then an attached question for my fellow board members is not going into specific cases, but do we want to know in our next board meeting a summary of probation issues and how it's been dealt with? That was a question to board members.
Yep. Sorry, Dr. Kawaguchi. Couldn't press my button to come off of mute. Are you thinking to narrow that time period to maybe March forward, or are you thinking the last year or two? What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure. I was just thinking that it would be valuable for us to know what's happening so that it doesn't come biting us in a board meeting where some probationer shows up and says, you know, I've been trying and trying to get, this waived because I just can't do my community service. And for us to be like, what are you talking about? So I know that staff is dealing with it. I'm just wanting to know if we think we need kind of just an overall summary of this is what's going on.
Maybe categorized by whether they're asking for a postponement or if they're asking for a total reprieve. Is that?
That'd be correct, yeah.
Yep, gotcha.
And do we want to know like the status pre and post COVID, or is it more just since March that you're interested in?
Hard to say, right? Because it depends on how this whole pandemic lasts and stay-at-home orders and all that stuff. It's kind of a moving target almost.
Mm-hmm.
So how many probationers do we have on probation at this moment? Staff?
There's 14 active.
14. Okay, so I don't know. I'm satisfied with staff's answer. He's reached out to all the probationers, introducing himself and inviting comments or concerns about the COVID and their probationary terms. But if other board members want a clearer report, it could be included in the next executive officer's report.
Yeah, I don't think I'm looking to create more work from Matt, honestly. I'm just wanting to have a snapshot so that we have an understanding of kind of what he's dealing with at ground level. Just to kind of less than a paragraph, here's what's going on. We got 14 probationers. Out of the 14, 10 have expressed difficulties with issues with their probation ranging from this to that. And just kind of getting us a little bit more detail, just a summary.
Along those lines, I know Dr. Kawaguchi was asking Matt how quickly he was able to respond. I don't think Glenn was asking for a precise amount of days. I mean, are you getting back to folks within, a week, a month, 6 months? What's the ballpark?
Yeah, it's definitely within a week. If there's any more extreme circumstances, I can always go to like Sheree or Shara, and we can talk about them amongst ourselves and get back to them usually within the day, if not, the next day, but definitely within a week for all these kind of concerns.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't know, Shara. I guess it wouldn't hurt to add a paragraph in your next executive director's report as to what's happening with probationers and under COVID.
We can certainly do that. I think it will start with the comments that Matt made here today. So just a matter of, I think, writing down the comments that Matt made regarding the number of instances of issues with ability to practice or ability to complete community service. Perhaps if we just include those directly within the report, that will suffice. So we'll start with that, and we'll certainly provide more information for the next board meeting materials.
Yeah, all right. There's two benefits to that. The way that I look at it, one of them is the benefit to the probationers, but there's also a benefit to the public, so that they know that we're still paying attention. So I'm just thinking, out loud that we know that special things are going on with COVID, and I think it's important for both probationers and the public that they know that we're addressing those things.
Shall we move on to examination and licensing programs? Who's giving that report?
Apologies, this is Natalia. I will be giving that report, and I will just do a brief overview of our programs. So for the licensing program, we're still processing the influx of applications from graduation season. We are getting towards the tail end of that, so there is an ending on the horizon. But we are still processing those. Of those applicants, we are still getting requests from them to either extend to take their CLRE exam due to COVID or to have their applications extended because they're not able to pass their NBEO. And I have been granting them those extensions so they may have extra time to complete their exams in full confidence. And we're also currently at a 10 to 12 week processing time for all applications, but we are starting to bring that down with the with there not being as much of an influx for applications as there have been. So that would be the optometry and the examination portion. For RDOs, very similar to the NBO exam, ABOs have been impacted by the current pandemic. So instead, what they've done, instead of having one exam in May and then again in August, the entire months in between have also been open for examination for their applicants. So we've been getting a constant influx for our optician program applicants. We were also very lucky to welcome a new staff member to the optician program, Michelle. She is currently handling her new role very well and has been able to assist us with processing opticianry applications. Were there any questions any board members had?
Natalia,
welcome, Michelle. Welcome, Michelle. Welcome. We need your help.
Yes,
Sorry.
I don't know. I just had one question for Natalia. Do you have any like general numbers as to how many extensions requests you've received for either the CLRE or the inability to do the NBEO from applicants? Is it a significant number?
It hasn't been as many as I thought it did when I took over the program. We're incredibly fortunate that a lot of our optometry applicants take their exams several months in advance. So most of those who are requesting extensions either couldn't take them for extenuating reasons or failed them the first time. So it's not that many. I want to say no more than 15, but I have been working with them. I want to make sure that they get everything handled.
Great, thank you.
And just to add to that report, we are in close communication with the deans of our 3 optometry schools within the state. We give them processing timeline updates, and they are gracious in sending those out via university listservs so that newly graduated folks will have a better understanding of where we are in real time, and also the need on their part to ensure that current contact information is exactly that current, as we know that lots of folks are moving around during the pandemic. And then also, situations for housing can be, short-term and long-term strained during that break of time between schooling and profession.
I have a question for Natalia. So I brought this question up over and over again related to how we report our processing time. And so on page 71, where there's numbers, initial licensure for optometrists, 247, average online processing time, 68. I don't think that that is actually a good reflection of what work is going on in our office. I certainly know anecdotally from one doctor that I hired when she told me that everything was finally in to her application for her application in the time that she actually received her license, it certainly wasn't anywhere close to 68 days. It was more like, I don't know, 5 weeks or something. So I'm just always seeking a way so that we can show that there's different numbers of processing times. There's a processing time for when an application is first submitted, and there's a processing time from when an applicant finally gets everything in, and then it is on us to be able to process it. And I know that that timeline is shorter than we usually show in our reports, and I'm just curious if there's a way that we can be able to show that.
Sure, and that's definitely something I noticed when I came into the program is that I don't know what's going on with these numbers. So that's something I've been looking at myself in order to fix. Hopefully by the next board meeting, you'll see more of those changes. Then they're here, and I will personally, I'm trying to bring the processing times down as well. I don't think 8 to 10 weeks is any way where it should be. It should be more 6 to 8 regardless. Or even shorter if we can manage it. I would hope. But yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Kawaguchi. Those numbers, 68, I'm assuming it means days. Could be accurate, but I'm not too certain. So I'm going to be looking at this for myself and figuring out what's going on here and if it's accurate.
Thank you.
Any more comments about examination and licensing? All right. Thank you, staff. Regulatory update.
Thank you, Mr. Mordomi. I'll just be real brief update about our current regulatory packages we're working on. The first one is implementation of Assembly Bill 2138. This is the one that deals with denial applications, revocation, or suspension of licenses and criminal convictions. We just got it back from DCA and from agency. They've approved it. The next step is going to be submitting it to the Office of Administrative Law, which I will be doing next week. OIL then has, I believe, 30 days to give us an approval or denial or something along those lines. So we should hopefully have this into law maybe by the end of the year. The second one is the implementation of Assembly Bill 443, which allows TPA licensed optometrists to administer immunizations. The DCA is currently reviewing the package. We are looking to make this an emergency regulation due to some changes because of the coronavirus, especially since there's a The CDC has ordered more than twice of the historical volume of influenza vaccinations and is developing programs to expand ways to get those vaccinations out. So we're looking to make this an emergency regulation. DCA Legal has asked us for justification, which we're looking at right now. Third is the optometry disciplinary guidelines, which is our 2019 update to the guidelines. This package is currently being put together by staff, by me. I'm guessing we'll get it over to DCA Legal hopefully by the end of summer or early in the fall. The other two dispensing optician disciplinary guidelines we approved earlier today, and continuing education regulations, we also approved those earlier today. So that's it for my report.
Thank you, Mark. I can't express, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but for anyone who's watching, how important the regulations regarding flu shots are. I mean, we're getting reports from all over the country that one of the kind of additional ways we can fight the coronavirus is for folks to get the flu shot, so we can kind of cut down that demand on our healthcare resources. So I implore DCA to deem this an emergency regulation so that our optometrists can help out in this crisis.
On that same vein, can I add a comment to that, Mark?
Sure.
So as
open up
we
the
are
floor.
looking
Go ahead.
to have an emergency COVID related to licensure board meeting, if there are specific things that we as an optometry board need to discuss related to vaccine emergency legislation and our potential need to provide feedback to the DCA so that optometry is represented, I think that we might have that format. So, Mark, the other Mark Johnson, if you feel that there is enough information for us to be able to provide to the DCA, then maybe we could attach it on and have it all in one meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Kawaguchi. I think we're still in the information gathering phase on this, and certainly if we do need to hold an emergency meeting for an update of this regulation, we certainly can. Shara, do you have any thoughts you want to add to that, or?
Certainly. So the statute as it currently stands does not give us an expanding scope, does not give optometrists an expanding scope of vaccinations that can be given. We are limited to 3 specific vaccinations. There have been discussions with the Medical Association about the ability for scope to be widened, but that is certainly a scope decision, a scope discussion that is occurring between the California Optometric Association and the California I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the medical board, but you know exactly what it's Medical Association, California Medical Association. So that is without a doubt a legislative solution that would need to be brokered through those channels.
Any other comments by members of the board? Okay, thank you. Shara, I see committee meeting updates is also part of your executive officer's report. We've covered a lot of that already. However, I'd like to invite the chairs of the various committees to chime in at this point if there are things from their committees that they would like to report to the board that have not already been discussed in this board meeting.
This is Lillian. So I'm chair of LegReg and chair of the PEC, and we've basically covered everything today. Mark went over all the LegReg stuff, and then the PEC stuff. Oh, it's been a long day. We've covered also. So I don't have anything else to report for those 2 committees.
And this is Sid with Consumer Protection, and I have nothing additional to add.
Okay, thank you, Sid. Madam Executive Officer, who is on outreach?
It's Dave. I believe I'm on outreach. One of the people.
Okay. Anything to report from there?
We have not met in a while, so no.
Okay.
So our public relations and outreach committee does currently consist of only Dr. Turetsky as our flux through the last few months of member term outs. There hasn't been an ability to gain quorum or to pull together a meeting. So we will need to discuss how we might populate that committee so that Dave isn't doing the work all himself.
All right.
It's been difficult.
He might like to be just a committee of one. No one will like to.
I'll put him on those social media posts. I think I trust him.
So let me just offer this to the board. I mean, we're short. We're short staffed. We're short boarded, if that's a term. If anyone is interested in joining David on the public outreach committee, they can contact me. I have the power to appoint people to committees, so this is also my problem. But I make that invitation. You can contact me offline. We may just have to wait until we get more members to this committee, to this board. All right. I think that concludes committee meeting updates from the executive officer's report. What remaining items do we have for this agenda?
Simply future agenda items and adjournment.
All right. Shara, if you can help me, I think we already have some future agenda items on our list. Perhaps it would be wise to just go through what those are, just to remind me.
President Moore, don't know if we took any public comment on the executive officer's report.
All right. Well, Shara, you know what I'm going to ask you. So while we're taking public comment on the executive officer's report, you can think about your answer.
All right, this is a moderator and the question and answer panel is now available. If you'd like to make a public comment, please type, I would like to make a comment, and submit it to all panelists. We're displaying instructions for your reference. This is a moderator and I see no request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes.
Okay.
So before Shara answers, I want to make staff that we've covered all the agenda items. We've kind of been jumping back and forth, and so I want to make sure there's nothing that we've forgotten. All right.
Yes, we've done a double check.
Okay, good. All right, future agenda items. What do we have on our list?
So through yesterday and today, we started with a future agenda item. Working up to a future agenda item, we have the work of the strategic planning work group, yourself and Dr. Turetsky, who will be going through the initial draft that was put together by the board yesterday. Then that will come back to the full board on October 23rd for further discussion, refinement, and hopefully adoption. Today, we spoke about stakeholder appointments to committees and additional research by legal and staff on the processes of other boards and ensuring that the statutes provide this or don't prevent this that's set out within our handbook. So we'll bring back at a future agenda the opportunity to discuss the potential for stakeholder appointments to the policy committees. And then, of course, we have a special meeting for alternative validations of competency to practice within optometry, which may have an outcome of a waiver that we're thinking will likely be set for September 18th, which, as that date has already been set aside for committee meetings on the board members' calendar.
Very good. Thank you very much. Do the board members have any comment or on what we've just discussed? Hearing nothing, do we have any public comment on future agenda items?
All right, this is the moderator.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before we open up for public comment, Dr. Turetsky has a comment.
Just a future agenda item, and I've actually brought this up a few times, and I don't know if it's somewhere in the works, but maybe Mark Johnson, you can give me a hand with this. The statute still states that an optometrist can only seek employment from a physician and surgeon who practices the specialty of ophthalmology versus just being employed by a physician and surgeon. That was changed about 40 years ago to reflect that. Prior to that time, I believe it just said physician and surgeon. And it restricts the ability of patients to receive care under specialized circumstances. Somebody, I brought this up before, somebody going to a neurologist for a traumatic brain injury. That neurologist might want to have an optometrist on their staff. And the way the law currently reads, that optometrist cannot be employed by a neurologist, only if that neurologist was a neuro-ophthalmologist. So I really think it's time that we updated this so an optometrist can actually work for any physician if that physician and that physician's patients would benefit from the services of an optometrist. And I believe that's, can't get it online, but Business and Professions 3109.
I've got this down, Dr. Turetsky. We'll discuss this going forward for sure.
Great. That's all I got.
All right. Now, any public comment?
All right, the question and answer panel is now available. If you'd like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and submit it to all panelists. We're displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator. I'm seeing no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And I believe the last item is adjournment. Great. If there's no objection by the members of the board, I think we will be adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, for your patience and hard work these past 2 days. Thank you to staff who had to put together the materials, all the materials for the board meeting, and then sit and listen to our questions and be grilled by all of us. I look forward to seeing everyone in September.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Be well.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.